Good evening, traveler. Or maybe I should say citizen. Tonight, we're going to drift back, not just a few decades, not just a few centuries, but nearly 2,000 years. So before we begin, do the modern things the Romans never could. Dim your lights, stretch out on your soft mattress, adjust your perfectly fluffed pillow, and maybe let the gentle hum of your fan or heater set the mood. You've already beaten the odds, because tonight you'll fall asleep in comfort while exploring a world where comfort was, let's say, in short supply. Close your eyes and imagine this. You've woken up in ancient Rome, not the Rome of Hollywood movies, where polished marble gleams in the sunlight and noble senators stride through perfect courtyards in spotless togas. No, not that Rome. You've woken up in the real Rome. It's the 2nd century CE, roughly the time when the empire is at its absolute peak. The emperors boast of conquests from Britain to Mesopotamia. Aqueducts stretch across the land like stone rivers, and roads connect the empire so tightly that a letter can travel from Gaul to Egypt faster than your Amazon delivery does on a bad day. But don't get too comfortable. You, my friend, are not a senator sipping imported wine on a marble terrace. You're not a general marching home to a triumph dripping in gold and applause. And you're definitely not an emperor lounging on purple cushions, casually deciding which neighboring kingdom to bully this week. You're an ordinary Roman, maybe a shopkeeper, maybe a laborer, maybe one of the thousands crammed into a tiny apartment building with walls so thin you can hear your neighbor sneeze 3 doors down. Welcome home now. Before you start imagining yourself in a spotless toga, let's get a few things straight. Rome is crowded. Rome is dirty. Rome is loud. Forget the idea of a peaceful city of gods and philosophers. Rome is more like the world's first megacity, and it behaves exactly like one. Markets overflowing with shouting vendors, beggars tugging at your sleeve, carts rattling over cobblestones, and livestock wandering in the streets because zoning laws haven't been invented yet. And the smells, oh, the smells. Hollywood doesn't like to tell you this part, but the aroma of Rome is unforgettable and not in a good way. Picture a blend of smoke from cooking fires, sweat from tens of thousands of unwashed bodies, the metallic temps of blood from the butcher's stalls, the sweet sour reek of spilled wine, and, of course, the lovely perfume of chamber pots being emptied into the streets. Yes, chamber pots. When you hear about Roman plumbing, don't imagine everyone had luxury bathrooms. Many Romans preferred the good old-fashioned method of throwing waste out the window and hoping gravity took care of the rest. So here you are. The year is around 150 CE, and you've woken up in the beating heart of the empire. On paper, this is the greatest civilization the world has ever seen. Roads, aqueducts, amphitheaters, armies, philosophy, law, the things that make the Roman name echo through history. But for the average person, life is not marble arches and grand speeches. It's survival. It's waking up each day wondering if the bread dole will keep you fed, if your ceiling will collapse, if your cough will kill you, or if your landlord's idea of maintenance is praying the building doesn't burn down tonight. Now, don't get me wrong, Rome does have its wonders. Walk through the Forum and you'll see temples, statues, markets overflowing with goods from every corner of the empire. You'll hear Greek philosophers arguing in the shade and politicians making promises they definitely don't intend to keep. Wander near the Colosseum and you'll hear the roar of 100,000 voices as gladiators fight for glory or for survival, depending on the day. This is an empire that can build roads across mountains, carry fresh water for miles without losing a drop, and stage mock naval battles in flooded arenas just to entertain a crowd. But that's the view from above. The closer you get to the ground, the more the shine starts to peel away. Rome might look like a city of stone, but it's held together by wood, sweat, and the constant risk of disaster. Fire is a constant danger. Disease spreads like gossip and crime. Let's just say if you walk down the wrong alley after dark, you're going to wake up without your sandals. Assuming you wake up at all. Still, there's something captivating about this world. Imagine standing in the middle of a Roman street. To your left, a fruit seller from North Africa shouts about his figs. To your right, a spice merchant from Syria shows off cinnamon sticks worth more than a month's wages. Behind you, a soldier boasts of his years on the frontier, while a child tugs at his mother's tunic, demanding a sweet cake. The empire is a machine that runs on trade, war, and labor, and you're one of its moving parts. Tonight, we're not going to talk about emperors and battles, at least not much. We're going to live a day or maybe a life in this world. From the moment you roll off your straw mattress to the moment you lie back down, exhausted from labor, full of cheap wine, and wondering if tomorrow will be any easier. We'll explore what you eat, how you wash, how you work, how you pray, and yes, how you eventually die. Because in Rome, death is never far away. But don't worry, we'll walk through it slowly, carefully, and maybe even with a smile. So, get comfortable. Think of this as the slowest possible time machine, powered not by gears and smoke, but by words. You're about to fall asleep in a city that never really sleeps. Rome hums, Rome growls, Rome never stops. But for tonight, you can drift through it at your own pace. Safe in the knowledge that you won't wake up tomorrow with a fever that sends you to the gods. Rome at its peak is power, wealth, and empire. Rome at street level is noise, stink, and struggle, and you, citizen, are right in the middle of it. Welcome to life and death in the Roman Empire. Waking up in a Roman insula, congratulations. You've survived the night in Rome, which is no small feat. Fires could have swept through your neighborhood. Thieves could have slipped in through the wooden shutters, or your ceiling might have decided. Gravity was stronger than craftsmanship. But you're still here, alive, breathing the warm Roman air, which, if we're being honest, smells suspiciously like smoke, sewage, and someone frying onions 3 floors down. You blink your eyes open, above you. A cracked plaster ceiling with dark stains that may or may not be mold. The sound of footsteps echoes through the floorboards as your upstairs neighbor starts stomping around, probably arguing with his wife about who drank the last cup of sour wine. Welcome to your insular Roman apartment building. Now, before you imagine something cozy, let's set the record straight. An insula is less like a modern apartment and more like stacking wooden boxes on top of each other than waiting to see which floor collapses first. Most insula are made of cheap brick and wood. Some stand as high as 6 or 7 stories. Sounds impressive until you realize that the higher you live, the cheaper the rent, and the greater your chance of dying when the place goes up in flames. You're not wealthy, so you don't live on the ground floor. That's reserved for shops and the rich tenants who can afford a private well or even their own latrine. No, you live somewhere in the middle. Not so high that you're constantly climbing stairs until your calves burn, but not so low that you have luxuries like running water. That means your morning routine begins with one thought. Where do I get water today? But before we get to that, let's talk about your bed. Or rather, your collection of straw, rags, and possibly fleas, generously called a bed. There's no memory foam here. Just a wooden frame, lumpy stuffing, and a blanket that smells like sweat, smoke, and last year's mildew. You roll over, and the sound of rats scurrying in the corner reminds you that you're not alone. They don't pay rent, but they're permanent residents. The sun hasn't even fully risen, but the city is already alive. Through the thin shutters, you hear the clatter of carts over stone, the shouts of market vendors, the barking of dogs. Rome wakes early, because survival doesn't allow for sleeping in. You stretch, carefully, because the floor beneath you creaks ominously. The walls are paper thin, and you hear your neighbor clearing his throat in a way that makes you wonder if consumption is contagious through plaster. Privacy, forget it. In an insula, everyone's business is everyone's business. If you sneeze, 3 apartments know. If you argue with your spouse, the entire building takes sides. Now, nature calls, and here comes the real fun. Where do you go? Unless you're rich enough to live on the ground floor with a private latrine. The answer is simple: downstairs, outside, and hopefully not in your neighbor's doorway. Some insula have communal facilities, basically a shared toilet for dozens of tenants. Imagine a wooden bench with holes cut out, a gutter of running water beneath it, and everyone sitting shoulder to shoulder like an awkward dinner party nobody wanted to attend. And let's not forget the sponge on a stick. Rome's answer to toilet paper. One sponge, shared by everyone, dipped in salty water between uses. You don't get your own. You just hope the last guy was reasonably hygienic, which, statistically speaking, he wasn't. Still, it's better than nothing, barely. If you're unlucky and your insula doesn't have even that, you rely on chamber pots. And where do those get emptied? Straight out the window. That's why walking in Roman streets is always a gamble. You're not just avoiding carts and animals, you're dodging surprise showers of human waste. The Romans even had a warning shout for it. Cave Canum. No, not beware the dog. This one is guard Lou, which roughly translates to look out below. If you don't move fast enough, well, congratulations. You're baptized in the worst way possible. Once you've handled your morning business, it's time to get dressed. Forget closets. You own maybe 1 or 2 outfits total. Your daily wear is a simple tunic, made of wool if you're poor, linen if you're slightly luckier. It's itchy, stained, and smells faintly of smoke no matter how many times you air it out. Washing clothes isn't as easy as tossing them into a machine. You'd need to lug water from the fountain, scrub with lye soap, and hope the fabric doesn't fall apart. So instead, you just keep wearing it until it practically disintegrates. On your feet, if you're fortunate, leather sandals. If you're not, bare feet toughened from years of walking on stone, dirt, and things you'd rather not identify. Either way, your soles look like they've been through 10 wars. Now that you're dressed for the day, congratulations, you look exactly like everyone else. Rome wasn't big on personal fashion for the poor. Your tunic is basically the Roman version of sweatpants. Universal, comfortable enough, and not winning you any style awards. Before you leave, you glance around your room. What do you see? Not much. A table, if you're lucky, a stool, maybe a clay lamp for when the sun goes down. The walls are bare, unless you count cracks as decoration. Storage, forget it. Your possessions probably fit into one basket. A bowl, a cup, a cheap knife, maybe a lucky charm or two. That's your entire worldly wealth. Now you're ready to face the street. But here's the catch. The stairwell of your insula is as dangerous as any battlefield. Wooden steps creak underfoot. The railing is more suggestion than support. If someone drops a pot of hot stew from above, it's your problem now. Fires start in kitchens, spread in seconds, and entire buildings collapse before the bucket brigade can arrive. Everyone in Rome knows someone who died because an insula gave way. And yet, thousands of people keep living in them, because the alternative homelessness is worse. As you step outside, the bright Roman morning greets you. Vendors are already shouting, carts are rolling, and the smell of fresh bread from the baker's shop mixes with the stink of last night's waste in the gutters. It's chaotic, noisy, filthy, and somehow alive. This is home. Your insula may be cramped, noisy, and one strong wind away from collapsing. But it's where you wake up, where you eat, where you try to survive another day in the empires. Biggest city and survival is exactly what today will demand. Because once you've escaped the squeaking floors, the shared toilets, and the sponge nestic, your next thought is simple. What's for breakfast? Food and drink, your stomach growls. You survived another night in your insula. You avoided chamber pot surprises on the stairs. And now you're ready for the greatest meal of the day, breakfast. Well, I should clarify. Breakfast in Rome isn't great in the way you might imagine. There are no stacks of pancakes, no bacon sizzling in a pan, no coffee brewing to jolt you awake. In fact, the Romans didn't even have coffee. The closest you'll get to a morning pick-me-up is a gulp of sour wine. Congratulations, your day just got interesting. If you're poor and, let's be honest, you probably are, your breakfast is going to be quick and uninspiring. A crust of stale bread dipped in a little wine or maybe watered down vinegar. That's it, bread and wine. It's not a feast, it's fuel. And even then, you're hoping the bread hasn't grown its own ecosystem of mold overnight. If it has, you scrape it off and eat it anyway, because food waste is a luxury you cannot afford now. If you're really lucky, maybe you'll get a smear of cheese or a few olives on the side. But most mornings, you just chew through the hardest loaf you've ever met in your life. Roman bread, especially for the poor, is coarse. It's made with grain ground on stone mills, which means tiny flecks of rock end up in the flour. Over time, this grinds your teeth down like sandpaper. By the time you're 30, your smile looks like you've been chewing gravel, which, in a way, you have. For the wealthier citizens, breakfast-IENTACULUM- is a little fancier. Fresh fruit, maybe figs or dates from the market, honey spread, over bread, cheese, eggs, sometimes even leftover fish from the night before. Nothing too heavy, though. Romans didn't believe in stuffing themselves first thing in the morning. The real eating was reserved for later in the day. But let's not forget what most Romans drank in the morning: wine. Not the rich, bold kind poured at modern wine tastings. No, this is thin, sour, and always watered down. Drinking it straight was considered barbaric. Even children drank diluted wine. It wasn't about pleasure, it was about safety. Water in Rome could be fine, yes, carried in from aqueducts. But by the time it trickled into public fountains or cisterns, it wasn't always trustworthy. Parasites, dirt, or waste could find their way in. Wine killed some of the nasties, so it was the safer option. So you drink wine at sunrise, on an empty stomach. Welcome to Roman mornings. As the day goes on, you'll need more food. Enter lunch, or prandium, If breakfast was disappointing, lunch isn't going to cheer you up much. For workers, it's a quick stop in the middle of the day. More bread, maybe some beans, maybe a few vegetables if they're in season. Lentils, onions, cabbage cheap, filling, and guaranteed to make the communal latrine an unpleasant experience later. Meat, forget it. Meat is expensive, unless it's a festival day or you've managed to poach a rabbit without getting caught and executed. Meat shows up rarely on your plate. Now, for the wealthy, lunch is a bit of a show. Picture a platter of cold meats, maybe sausages, olives, hard-boiled eggs, fresh bread drizzled with olive oil, and sweet fruits. Still not a massive meal, but definitely a step above your bean stew. They'll sip watered-down wine, discuss politics, maybe read a little poetry. It's civilized. Meanwhile, you're scarfing down barley porridge and hoping you can get back to work before your overseer yells at you. But here's the thing about Roman eating habits. The entire day revolves around the main event, the real show. Cena. This is where the empire shows its true colors. If you're poor, dinner is just another round of whatever you had at lunch. Barley, porridge, beans, maybe some bread dipped in olive oil. If you're lucky, you'll have a few vegetables stewed into it. If you're really lucky, a scrap of meat. But don't get excited. It's usually a thin slice of pork fat or something, boiled until the flavor gave up and went home. The rich, on the other hand, turn dinner into an Olympic sport. Imagine a lavish villa, torches, flickering couches arranged around low tables. The wealthy don't sit in chairs like you do. They recline, leaning on one elbow, eating with their fingers while slaves bring in endless courses. The meal could last for hours. Appetizers might include oysters, snails, or eggs seasoned with herbs. Then come roasted meats, pork, venison, even flamingo tongue if the host is feeling particularly ridiculous. Fish dishes with exotic sauces, stews thick with honey and wine, plates of fresh fruit imported from far corners of the empire. And don't forget the sauces Romans loved garum, a fermented fish sauce that smells like death but tastes like salt and power. They put it on everything, and the wine endless, flowing, mixed with honey, herbs, or even seawater for that special kick. By the time dessert arrives, pastries, nuts, honey cakes, the guests are either blissfully drunk, arguing about politics, or pretending to enjoy a poetry recital from the host's cousin. Now, you might be wondering about that famous Roman vomit. The myth says rich Romans stuffed themselves until they vomited, then kept eating. The truth: the vomitorium was just an exit hallway in an amphitheater. But don't let that ruin the image. Some Romans did overeat to the point of sickness. They just didn't build special rooms for it. Between rich and poor, the difference in diet is staggering. The wealthy feast like gods, while the poor scrape by on grain and beans. And yet, both live in constant danger from their food. Spoiled meat, contaminated water, poisonous cookware, yes. Lead pots were a thing. All could make a meal deadly. If you were lucky, you just spent a few days doubled over in pain. If not, congratulations, you're dead before dessert. And then there's street food. Rome, being the bustling metropolis it was, had plenty of stalls selling ready-to-eat meals. Bread, sausages, fried fish, chickpea pancakes. The smells waft through the streets, tempting you even if you're broke. Grab a bite on the go, but watch your purse. Crowds are the perfect cover for pickpockets. And if the vendor reused yesterday's oil, well, let's just say you'll regret it in the latrine later. Children, they eat whatever the adults do. There are no special meals for kids. Toddlers gnaw on bread crusts. Older kids slurp bean stew. And yes, they drink diluted wine. Childhood is short, and so is the menu. So, at the end of the day, what's the Roman diet in a nutshell? For the poor, bread, porridge, beans, and occasional scraps. For the rich, feasts that double as theatre, dripping with exotic dishes, meant more to impress than to nourish. Either way, food is never guaranteed to be safe, clean, or satisfying. Still, as you chew through another bowl of barley mush, you remind yourself it's food. It keeps you alive. And in Rome, staying alive is already a victory. Now, with your stomach moderately full, it's time to think about another pressing question. How do you keep yourself clean in a city this filthy? Public hygiene and health, so you've eaten your barley porridge and you're ready to face the day. But before you head to work, you pause. Something's bothering you. Your tunic is itchy, your hair feels greasy, and you're not entirely sure if that smell is coming from the street below or from yourself. Time to face one of the biggest questions in Rome. How do you stay clean in a city of 1 million sweaty people? The good news, Romans loved bathing. The bad news, their idea of clean wasn't quite the same as yours. The Roman toilet, let's start with the basics. Answering nature's call. You already braved the communal latrine once this morning, but the truth is, you'll probably be back. These public toilets aren't private stalls. They're long stone benches with holes cut into them, usually lined up side by side. Imagine sitting shoulder-to-shoulder with your neighbors while you all stare at a painted wall, trying to make small talk and pretending you don't hear what's happening. There's no toilet paper. Just the infamous Tessoriyama communal sponge on a stick, dipped in salty or vinegary water, then passed to the next person. Sanitary? Not really, but it's better than nothing. The running water underneath helps carry away waste, but don't let that fool you. The smell is overwhelming. Walk past a latrine and your nose instantly regrets it. Still, public toilets were a kind of social hub. People chatted, gossiped, even discussed business deals while doing their business. For the Romans, hygiene and community were often the same thing. Bathhous. The Roman spa dive. There's one thing Romans bragged about. It was their bathhouses. These weren't just places to wash off dirt. They were giant social centers. Gym, part spa, part networking event. For a small fee, anyone could spend hours at the Thermae. From slaves to senators, picture it. Vast halls with marble floors, soaring arches, mosaics of gods and heroes on the walls. Pools of hot water, warm water, cold water, steam rooms, saunas, massage areas, even libraries. The baths were like the Roman version of a wellness retreat, except louder, busier, and a lot sweatier. Your typical routine: first, you exercise, maybe lifting weights, wrestling, or playing ball games. Then you strip down. Romans weren't shy and oil yourself up. Why oil? Because instead of soap, they rubbed olive oil onto their skin. Then they scraped it off with a tool called a strigil, which removed sweat, dirt, and hair all in one go. Congratulations, you're now slightly less disgusting. After that, you dip into the warm pool tepidarium, then the hot pool caldarium. Then, if you're feeling brave, the freezing cold plunge frigidarium. Along the way, you might get a massage, gossip with friends, or argue about politics. For the rich, the bathhouse is also a place to show off. For the poor, it's one of the only luxuries you can afford. But don't imagine it's all glamorous. The pools weren't exactly disinfected. With hundreds of people dipping in and out daily, they were more like giant Roman soups of sweat, dirt, oil, and whatever skin conditions people brought in. If you walked out with fewer fleas than you walked in with, you called it a win. Water. Aqueducts. And Leadrome is famous for its aqueducts, those towering stone arches carrying fresh water into the city. And yes, they were impressive. They delivered millions of gallons every day, filling fountains, cisterns, baths, and even private homes of the wealthy. Public fountains dotted every neighborhood, so in theory, you always had access to clean water. But here's the catch. Not all pipes were safe. Many were made of lead. And while modern historians debate how much lead poisoning actually affected the population, let's just say drinking water in Rome wasn't exactly doctor-approved. Combine that with waste sometimes seeping into wells, and you're fresh. Water could occasionally carry surprises. Still, compared to other ancient cities, Rome was way ahead. Running water, underground sewers like the Cloaca Maxima, and public baths put it miles ahead of most of the world. It just wasn't quite as pristine as marble statues might suggest. Dental disasters. Let's talk about your smile. Spoiler, it's terrible. Remember that gritty bread ground with stone mills? Yeah, those tiny rock particles wore down Roman teeth like sandpaper. Add in a diet heavy on sour wine, vinegar, and honey, and cavities were a common companion. Toothbrushes, nope. Toothpaste, at best, some crushed herbs or charcoal rubbed onto your teeth. Some people rinsed with vinegar or urine. Yes, you heard that, right, urine. Because of its ammonia content. Dentistry existed, but it wasn't fun. If you had a toothache, the solution was usually to pull it out. No anesthesia, no clean instruments, just a strong hand and a pair of tongs. Infections often followed, and something as small as a rotten tooth could become life-threatening. So, if you've got a nice modern toothbrush at home, maybe give it an extra squeeze tonight. You're living better than an emperor in that department, Roman. Medicine, hope, and leeches. What if you get sick? Well, brace yourself. Roman medicine was a mix of herbal remedies, religious rituals, and guesswork. Theories of the time revolved around balancing the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you had too much of one, you were ill. The solution: bloodletting, purging, or a change in diet. Got a fever? Too much bloodlets drain some out. Stomachache must be your black bile acting up. The treatment: a laxative, or maybe just praying. Harder doctors Medici did exist, but their knowledge was limited. Some were skilled, especially military doctors who treated wounds on the battlefield. Others were little more than quacks, offering potions, charms, and promises. Surgery was possible, but remember, no anesthesia, no sterilization, no antibiotics. If the knife didn't kill you, the infection probably would. And let's not forget plagues. The Antonine Plague in the 2nd century killed millions across the empire. No one knew why. To them, it was the gods' punishment, not a virus. People prayed, sacrificed, or fled. But there was no escape from disease in a crowded, dirty city. Cosmetics and smells, if you're thinking Romans, smelled better than medieval. Peasants, well, sort of. Wealthy Romans used perfumes, scented oils, and powders to mask odors. Women painted their faces with lead-based makeup, which, of course, slowly poisoned them. Men used colognes made from herbs and flowers, but the average person, you smell like sweat, smoke, oil, and whatever you had for dinner yesterday. And because laundry is rare and water isn't always clean, your clothes carry those smells proudly. Still, the baths, the oils, the perfumes, they all gave Romans a sense of being civilized. Compared to the barbarians outside the empire, they believed they were squeaky clean. Reality, they were just marinated in a different kind of filth. Life expectancy and everyday survival. So how healthy are you really? If you make it past childhood, you might live into your 40s or 50s, maybe longer if you're lucky. But infant mortality is brutal. Nearly half of children don't survive to age 5. Diseases, malnutrition, accidents, sore waiting around every corner. Even as an adult, one bad infection, one wound gone wrong, one fever, and you could be gone within days. Without modern medicine, survival often depended more on luck and resilience than on skillful doctors. And yet, despite all this, Romans kept going. They worked, played, laughed, bathed, and believed their city was the greatest in the world. In a way, it was. Just don't breathe too deeply when you walk past the latrines. So, you've scraped yourself with oil, braved the communal sponge, and maybe even taken a plunge in the cold pool. You're as clean as a Roman can be, which means it's time for the real challenge, surviving a day of work. The sun is climbing higher now, and Rome is in full swing. Vendors shout, carts rattle, hammers clang. And you, citizen, have one pressing thought. How am I going to make a living today? Rome may be the center of the empire, but it's not exactly a land of equal opportunity. Your chances in life depend heavily on where you were born, what family you belong to, and, let's be blunt, whether you're free or enslaved. Farmers, feeding the empire. Let's start with the backbone of Roman society, farmers. Most Romans, even if they live in the city now, have roots in the countryside. Grain, olives, grapes, these keep the empire alive. Without the grain ships arriving from Egypt, half of Rome would starve in a month. A farmer's life is backbreaking. Sunrise to sunset, plowing fields, tending vines, harvesting crops. Tools are simple wooden plows, sickles, baskets, oxen pull. The heavy loads, but most of the labor comes from human muscle. Forget tractors, forget machines. If the weather turns bad, your entire year's work vanishes into dust or mud, and the rewards slim. The state taxes you, your landlord demands a share, and what's left barely keeps your family alive. If famine strikes, you're out of luck. Rome may boast of its wealth, but ordinary farmers rarely see it. The urban poor, jack of all trades in the city, work looks different. You might be a builder, hauling bricks up creaking scaffolds. You might be a porter, carrying goods through the crowded streets. You might be a vendor, shouting yourself hoarse, trying to sell vegetables before they rot in the sun. The workday is long, the pay is meager, and there are no labor rights. If you get injured, tough luck. There's no insurance, no compensation, no sick leave. You just fall behind, and hunger does the rest. Still, the city offers variety. Bakers fire up ovens at dawn, filling the streets with the smell of bread. Blacksmiths hammer iron into tools and weapons. Potters spin clay into jars. Cobblers stitch sandals. Each craft has its place, and Rome's sheer size means there's always demand. But there's also competition. Too many workers chasing too few coins and wages, barely enough to cover bread and rent. No wonder riots break out when the grain dole falters. Hungry people are dangerous people. The grain dole Rome's safety net, speaking of bread, Rome has a unique system to keep its poor from starving. The unknowner or grain dole. Every month, eligible citizens line up to receive free or subsidized grain imported from the provinces. It's the empire's way of buying peace. Keep the stomachs full and the riots stay manageable. But the grain is raw. You still have to grind it, bake it, or boil it into porridge. And if supplies run late, say, because pirates intercepted a shipment, you feel it immediately. Prices soar, bellies empty, tempers flare. Bread isn't just food in Rome, it's politics. Every emperor knows, give the people bread and circuses, and they won't overthrow you. Slavery, the engine of the empire. Now we come to the dark heart of Roman labor. Slavery. Slaves are everywhere, on farms, in workshops, in households, even in government offices. They make up a huge chunk of the workforce, and their lives vary, wildly depending on luck. Some slaves toil in the fields, chained, whipped, and worked to death. Others serve in wealthy homes, tending fires, cooking meals, tutoring children. A few even become trusted secretaries or accountants. But no matter how skilled or comfortable the job, a slave is still property, bought, sold, punished, discarded. Freedom is possible. Slaves can be manumitted, set free by their masters, and some even rise to wealth and status. But most never escape. For every freedman sipping wine in a tavern, hundreds more are bent under the weight of endless labor. And here's the bitter truth. The entire Roman economy rests on their backs. Every marble villa, every banquet, every aqueduct, it's all built with slave labor. Without it, the empire doesn't function. Trades and specialties, not all jobs are drudgery. Rome is a vast city with demand for everything. Doctors patch up wounds, lawyers argue in courts, teachers drill children in Greek and Latin, artists paint frescoes, mosaic makers set tiles, sculptors carve statues, but don't romanticize it. Artists aren't starving geniuses waiting for glory. They're craftsmen paid by the job, often treated as little better than laborers. Lawyers, many are more interested in bribes than justice. Teachers, underpaid, overworked, and mocked by their students. Some things never change. Merchants and traders. Rome is also a hub of global trade. Spices from India, silk from China, ivory from Africa, amber from the Baltic all pass through its markets. Merchants who handle this trade can grow rich, but they also face risk. Ships sink, caravans are robbed, bandits strike. One bad deal and you're ruined. Still, the markets are dazzling. Stalls overflowing with exotic goods, the smell of cinnamon and pepper filling the air. For most citizens, these luxuries are out of reach. But just seeing them reminds you, you live at the center of the world. The idle rich, and then there are the elite. Senators, equestrians, wealthy landowners. What do they do all day? Not much. They own estates, collect rents, scheme in politics, and spend their time at banquets, games, and the baths. Work is for others. For them, life is leisure mixed with intrigue. Of course, maintaining that leisure requires constant attention. They cultivate clients, ordinary citizens who depend on their patronage. Every morning, clients line up at their patron's house to greet him, hoping for handouts or favors. In return, they give political support. It's a system built on status, obligation, and flattery. So while the poor sweat in fields and workshops, The rich spend their mornings listening to poetry recitals or debating philosophy, and they still complain about how exhausting life is. Days end by the time the sun begins to set. Your body aches from labor. Maybe you hauled stones at a construction site. Maybe you stood all day in the market, shouting yourself hoarse. Maybe you baked bread in an oven so hot it felt like working inside a volcano. You'll pay a few coins, enough for bread, maybe some oil, maybe a little wine. Rent will swallow the rest. Savings. Forget it. Tomorrow you'll do it all again. Still, there's a certain rhythm to it. Rome buzzes with life, every trade and task weaving together into the empire's heartbeat. From the sweat of farmers to the schemes of senators. It all keeps the city alive. And tonight, when you finally lie down in your straw bed, you know one thing for sure. You've earned your rest. But before sleep comes entertainment. And in Rome, entertainment is never in short supply. Entertainment and leisure, the day's labor is done. Your back aches, your hands are raw, and your stomach is already thinking about the next bowl of barley mush. But before you crawl back into your insula and collapse on your straw mattress, there's one more piece of Roman life waiting for you. Entertainment. And when it comes to entertainment, Rome doesn't do things halfway. Forget quiet evenings with a book. Forget Netflix binges. The Romans believe in noise, spectacle, and blood. Lots of blood. The arena blood for breakfast. Let's start with the big one, the Colosseum. Officially, it's called the Flavian Amphitheater. But no one bothers with that. It's simply the Colosseum, the grandest stage of death in the empire. Picture it, a massive oval of stone, towering over the city, holding up to 50,000 people. Crowds pour in, buzzing with excitement. Admission, free. The emperor foots the bill, because nothing buys loyalty like free slaughter. You find a seat somewhere up in the nosebleeds close enough to see, far enough that you're not catching stray blood droplets. The air hums with energy. Vendors walk the stands, selling nuts, olives, maybe even wine. Children tug at their father's tunics, eager for the show. And then it begins. Trumpets blare. The emperor raises his hand. The gates creak open. Out pour the gladiators' men, armed with swords, nets, tridents, shields. Some are slaves, forced to fight. Others are volunteers chasing fame. All are trained killers, stepping into a sandpit that will decide who lives and who doesn't. The fights are brutal. A Murmelo with his heavy shield squares off against a Resiarius with his net and trident. Steel clashes, sand kicks up, the crowd roars. When a fighter goes down, all eyes turn to the emperor. Will he spare the man? Will he order the fatal blow? One gesture decides. Life or death as afternoon entertainment. But gladiators aren't the only act. Sometimes there are wild beasts, huntslions, leopards, bears, even elephants dragged in. From across the empire, hunters battle them with spears while the crowd cheers. Other times, criminals are thrown in with the animals, a punishment that doubles as spectacle. The Colosseum is theater, sport, and execution all rolled into one, and it works. For a few hours, the people forget hunger, rent, and politics, all. That matters is the roar of the crowd and the sight of blood on sand. The circus racing toward glory if the Colosseum is about blood. The Circus Maximus is about speed. This massive racetrack, capable of holding over 150,000 spectators, is Rome's answer to Formula One. Chariot racing is the city's obsession. The setup is simple. For teams red, white, blue, green, each has its loyal fans, and I mean loyal. People tattoo their team colors on their skin, argue endlessly in taverns, and occasionally riot when results don't go their way. You find yourself crammed into the stands, surrounded by screaming supporters waving banners. The smell of horses and sweat fills the air. Trumpets sound, the gates burst open, and the chariots thunder onto the track. Each chariot is a light wooden frame pulled by 4 horses, driven by a man with reins wrapped around his waist for extra control. It's fast, dangerous, and absolutely thrilling. Drivers whip their horses, lean into turns, and try to ram opponents into the central barrier. Crashes are common, horses tumble, wheels splinter, and drivers are dragged screaming to their deaths. The crowd loves it. Victors are celebrated like rock stars. A successful charioteer can earn more prize money than the wealthiest senators. Imagine being a poor baker one day and the hero of Rome the next. For most fans, though, the real thrill is betting. A lucky coin placed on the right team could mean a week's worth of bread, or, more often, an empty stomach. The theatre, drama, and decadence, maybe blood and racing, aren't your style. Maybe you're in the mood for words instead of weapons. Rome has you covered with its theatres. Here, actors strut across wooden stages, performing tragedies, comedies, and farces. Masks cover their faces, amplifying their voices. The wealthy sit in the shaded seats, the poor cram into the open air. And everyone watches as myths, politics, and slapstick unfold. Comedy is the crowd favorite. Romans love bawdy jokes, slapstick humor, and ridiculous characters. Subtlety, not really their thing. Expect jokes about drunks, cheating wives, and greedy politicians. The more outrageous, the better. But theatre also has a political edge. A clever playwright might slip in satire about current events, criticizing the elite under the guise of humor. If the crowd laughs too loudly, senators shift uncomfortably. In their seats, taverns, gambling, and dice not every evening involves a grand spectacle. Sometimes, entertainment is as simple as slipping into a tavern. These are smoky, noisy rooms filled with cheap wine, questionable stew, and lots of dice. Games, gambling is everywhere. Dice clatter on wooden tables, coins change hands, voices rise in triumph or despair. Officially, gambling is restricted, but no one takes the law seriously. Even emperors are known to enjoy a throw of the dice. In taverns, you'll also find prostitutes, pickpockets, and drunkards picking fights. They're rowdy, dirty, and dangerous, but for many Romans, they're the only affordable escape from daily grind, festivals, and public holidays. If you think your calendar is packed with holidays, Rome has you beat. There are dozens of festivals throughout the year, honoring gods, marking victories, or simply giving people an excuse to party. During the Saturnalia, for instance, the whole social order flips. Masters serve their slaves, gifts are exchanged, gambling is allowed, and everyone feasts and drinks until they collapse. Think of it as Christmas, Mardi Gras, and April Fool's Day rolled into one. Other festivals bring parades, sacrifices, athletic contests, and theatre. For ordinary citizens, festivals are the rare times when food, drink, and entertainment are free and for the emperors. They're perfect opportunities to remind everyone who's paying for the fun. Leisure for the wealthy, for the rich. Leisure looks different. After the baths and a long dinner, they might stroll in their gardens, read poetry, or listen to musicians. Some retreat to countryside villas, hunting deer or fishing in private ponds. Others collect exotic pets, peacocks, monkeys, even giraffes, shipped in from Africa, but even the wealthy crave spectacle. Senators still flock to the games, cheering like schoolboys when gladiators clash. Leisure, like everything else in Rome, is a mix of elegance and brutality. Why it matters, so why all this entertainment? Because Rome runs on it. Bread fills the belly, but circuses filled the mind. A hungry crowd might riot, but a distracted crowd stays loyal. Give them games, races, plays, and festivals, and they'll cheer the emperor instead of questioning him. For you, the ordinary Roman entertainment is more than distraction. It's escape. For a few hours, you're not a laborer, not a tenant in a crumbling insula. You're part of a roaring crowd, swept up in spectacle, united by the thrill of the moment. And as night falls, whether you've spent the day cheering chariots, laughing at a bawdy play, or dicing away your last coin, you stumble home. Tomorrow will bring work, hunger, and struggle again. But tonight, you had a taste of Rome at its most alive. Religion and beliefs, the roar of the circus fades, the taverns quiet down, and as the stars prick the Roman sky, another part of life takes over religion. Because in Rome, the gods aren't just up in the heavens, lounging around on Olympus. They're everywhere. They're watching your every move, judging every sacrifice, and if you're lucky, occasionally helping you out. The household gods, let's start small. Your home. Even in your cramped insular apartment, there's space for the Lares and Pinates. Your household gods. Maybe it's just a tiny shelf with clay figurines. Every day, you offer them a bit of wine, a scrap of food, or a whispered prayer. Why? Because you need them on your side. These little spirits guard your home, your family, and your pantry. Forget to honor them, and things will go wrong. Spoiled grain, illness, accidents. A wise Roman keeps the Lares happy. Even the act of eating isn't free from ritual. Before every meal, you toss a few crumbs into the fire or onto the floor, a tiny offering to the spirits who keep you alive. Religion isn't separate from life, is life, woven into every action. Temples and public worship step outside, and you can't miss Rome's devotion. Temples line the streets, their columns soaring skyward, statues of gods staring down at you. Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, Mars, all have their shrines. Public religion is serious business. Priests perform sacrifices, leading white-robed animals to the altar. The crowd gathers, watching as the priest slits the throat, catches the blood, and burns the organs. The smell of roasting flesh rises with the prayers. If the omens look good, say, the liver has the right number of lobes, then the gods are pleased. If not, well, better find another victim and try again. It may seem grim, but for Romans, sacrifice is like paying taxes to the divine. The gods protect Rome as long as Rome pays in respect and offerings. No sacrifice, no victory. Simple as that. Omens. And superstitions. Romans are nothing if not superstitious. You don't sign contracts without checking the omens. You don't start a journey if the chickens refuse to eat. Yes, sacred chickens. Priests keep them, and if the birds gobble their food with enthusiasm, the gods approve. If the chickens sulk and go hungry, cancel your plans. Entire military campaigns have been delayed or disastrously ignored because of chicken appetite, dreams. Lightning strikes, bird flights, all are messages from the divine. priests called augurs interpret these signs, advising generals, senators, even emperors. Ignore them at your peril. For the average Roman, superstition governs daily life too. You mutter protective charms against the evil eye. You hang phallic amulets around your neck or above your doorway to ward off bad luck. Yes, really. Rome believed in the protective power of a good, old-fashioned carved phallus, foreign gods and mystery cults. But Rome isn't just about Jupiter and Mars. The empire stretches across continents, and with it comes a flood of foreign gods. Some are adopted smoothly: Isis from Egypt, Mithras from Persia, Cybele from Anatolia. Their cults spread quickly, offering mystery, magic, and sometimes a promise of life after death. Take Mithras. His followers gather in dark underground temples, sharing secret rituals, swearing oaths, and reenacting the god's slaying of a sacred bull. It's a religion of soldiers, brotherhood, and loyalty. For men weary of politics and poverty, it offers something the old gods don't, meaning Dot, or Isis, the Egyptian mother goddess. Her cult appeals especially to women and the poor. Her processions are vibrant, filled with music, incense, and hope of protection. In a city of uncertainty, Isis promises comfort. The Roman elite grumble about these foreign cults, calling them superstitious nonsense. And yet, they spread because they give people something Rome's old religion often doesn't: intimacy, the imperial cult. Then there's the ultimate blending of religion and politics: emperor worship. Starting with Augustus, emperors are honored not just as rulers, but as semi-divine figures. Temples go up in their name, sacrifices are made in their honor, and their statues watch over the city. You don't have to believe the emperor is a god. You just have to act like you do. Participation is loyalty, and refusing can be seen as treason. Bow to the emperor's statue, toss incense on the altar, and you're safe. Refusing, you might find yourself on trial. Christianity, the outsider. And speaking of refusal, let's talk about a small, strange group causing murmurs in Rome: the Christians. They refuse to worship the old gods, refuse to sacrifice to the emperor, and insist there's only one God. To Romans, this isn't just weird, it's dangerous. If the gods are angered by neglect, then the stubbornness of Christians puts everyone at risk. For now, Christianity is still a minority faith, whispered about in alleys, practiced in secret gatherings. Some Romans dismiss them as harmless oddballs. Others accuse them of atheism, cannibalism, a misunderstanding of communion, and treason. Persecutions come and go, sometimes brutal, sometimes lax. No one realizes yet that this small sect will one day eclipse Jupiter himself. But from your place in 2nd century Rome, Christianity is just another odd rumor, one more cult among dozens. Religion as social glue. What all this adds up to is simple: religion is everywhere. It's not about personal belief as much as collective practice. The gods keep Rome strong, but only if Rome honors them together. Skip the sacrifices, neglect the temples, mock the omens, and you risk not just your own luck but the fate of the whole empire. For you, the ordinary Roman religion is habit. You offer a crumb of bread at dinner. You nod to the shrine on the street corner. You attend festivals because it's tradition, and because free food and wine never hurt. You may not ponder theology, but you know the gods are always watching. Nightfall prayers as you return home at night. Past temples lit with flickering torches, past altars smoking with fresh offerings. You whisper a small prayer. maybe to Jupiter for protection, maybe to Venus for love, maybe to Fortuna for luck. It doesn't matter if you believe deeply or just hedge your bets. In Rome, faith is insurance. You never know which god is listening, and you don't want to find out the hard way that you offended the wrong one. So, with the gods hopefully appeased, you crawl back into your insula, pull your scratchy blanket over your shoulders, and drift to sleep. Tomorrow, after all, may bring another test of survival. But survival in Rome isn't just about gods and luck. It's about who you know, where you stand, and how much power you hold. Which brings us to the true engine of the empire: politics. Politics and power, religion may keep the gods happy, but politics keeps Rome running, or at least stumbling forward in its chaotic, backstabbing way. And in Rome, politics isn't just about laws and speeches. It's about survival. It's about who flatters whom, who betrays whom, and who manages to stay alive long enough to enjoy the spoils. The Senate, tradition and theatre at the heart of it all, stands the Senate. You picture it as a grand body of wise old men in togas, guiding the empire with dignity. Reality check. It's more like a retirement club for the wealthy, part debating hall, part gossip circle. Yes, the Senate once held real power back in the days of the Republic. Senators debated wars, passed laws, checked generals, but now, in the 2nd century CE, the emperor holds the real reins. The Senate mostly approves what the emperor already decided. It's ceremonial, but the senators still cling to their dignity, pretending they matter. They do still squabble though. Arguments over honors, over which family gets the best seats at games, over who gets to lead a province. They deliver long-winded speeches that no one remembers, except the poor scribe tasked with writing them down. For you, the average Roman, the Senate is distant background noise. You know it exists. You might even cheer or boo when senators appear in public. But your daily bread doesn't depend on their debates. The emperor, power wrapped in paranoia, the true center of power, is the emperor. Augustus built the role carefully, first, among equals, not a king, but something greater. By your time, though it's clear, the emperor is king in all but name. He controls the army, the treasury, the laws. His face is stamped on your coins. His statues loom over your streets. His name is shouted in prayers. But with great power comes great paranoia. Emperors know that their throne isn't secure. A senator could plot. A general could march on Rome. A guard could slip a dagger into their ribs. Assassination isn't a rare event. It's practically a career hazard. Some emperors embrace paranoia, surrounding themselves with guards and spies. Others drown it in excess, throwing games and banquets. To buy popularity, a lucky few manage to balance authority with caution, ruling long enough to die of old age. But many don't. For you, the ordinary Roman, the emperor is both protector and problem. If he's generous with grain and games, you cheer. If he's stingy or cruel, you curse his name in the tavern. Either way, his moods ripple down into your life. Patronage and clients' politics in Rome isn't just about the Senate or the emperor. It's about the web of patronage that ties society together. Every morning, clients line up outside their patron's house. You might be one of them, waiting for a small handout, a favor, maybe even help finding work. In return, you owe loyalty support in elections, applause at speeches, maybe even muscle in the streets if needed. For the wealthy, clients are a sign of status. The more people waiting outside your door, the more powerful you appear. For the poor, patronage is survival. It's not charity. It's politics turned personal. This system extends all the way up to the emperor himself. Senators, generals, governors, they're all clients of the emperor, seeking favor, rewards, and power. Rome runs less on laws than on relationships. Corruption and bribery. If you imagine Rome as a city of noble ideals, think again. Corruption is as Roman as olive oil. Want a position as governor. Pay the right bribe. Want a court case to go your way, slip the judge a gift. Want a contract to build an aqueduct. Grease some palms. Bribery isn't shameful, it's expected. Everyone knows the game. Everyone plays it. This doesn't mean Rome falls apart. In fact, corruption keeps things moving. Bribes smooth delays by cooperation and keep ambitious men satisfied. It's less about justice and more about balance and endless tug-of-war between greed and necessity. The military and politics, and hovering over all of this is the army. Rome's legions aren't just soldiers, they're kingmakers. A popular general with loyal troops can march into Rome and claim the throne. It's happened before, it will happen again. Every emperor knows. That's why they shower the legions with gifts, bonuses, and praise. Keep the soldiers happy, keep the throne, displease them, and you might wake up with a new emperor declared in some far-off camp. For the soldiers themselves, politics is distant, but their loyalty is currency. They fight Rome's wars, guard its borders, and sometimes decide its rulers. The common citizen's role, so where do you fit into all this? As an ordinary Roman, your political power is limited. Yes, you can vote for local magistrates, for certain offices, but real decisions are made far above your head. Still, your voice matters in one way. Crowds gather enough angry citizens in the forum, and suddenly politicians listen. Shout loud enough in the amphitheater, and the emperor notices. Public opinion, expressed in cheers and riots, shapes politics as much as senatorial debates. Bread and circuses aren't just entertainment, they're crowd control. Keep you happy, keep you quiet. Ignore you, and Rome burns. Ambition and betrayal. At the top, politics is deadly. Today's ally is tomorrow's enemy. A senator whispers against you. A rival general courts the legions. A freedman poisons your wine. Ambition fuels Rome, but it also devours it. You've seen emperors hailed as gods one day and stabbed in the Senate the next. You've seen friends denounce each other to save their own skins. In Rome, survival means knowing when to flatter, when to bribe, and when to disappear. Why it matters, all this scheming. Bribing and posturing might seem far away from your daily life of bread and porridge. But politics decides your fate more than you think. The grain dole, the games, the taxes, the wars, they all flow from decisions made in palaces and senate houses. You may not sit in the Senate, but you feel its weight every time you queue for bread. You may never meet the emperor, but his whims shape whether your city thrives or starves. And tomorrow, a new emperor could rise. A general could march on Rome. A senator could betray his peers. And you, ordinary citizen, will wake up, shrug, and ask the only question that matters. Will there still be bread? So, with the gods above and the emperor on the throne, Rome keeps turning. Not smoothly, not nobly, but turning. And for you, survival still depends less on politics and more on the walls around you. Which means it's time to look at where you live, where you sleep, and how you survive the night. Housing and family life politics might decide the empire's fate. But for you, the real battleground is closer, home. And home in Rome depends entirely on your wealth. For some, it's a palace of mosaics and fountains. For most, it's a cramped, creaking apartment where privacy is a luxury and fire is a constant fear. The apartment blocks if you're poor or even moderately well off. You probably live in an insula, one of Rome's towering apartment buildings. Don't imagine modern high-rises with elevators and plumbing. Think instead of wooden staircases, narrow hallways, and walls so thin you can hear your neighbor sneezing, probably smell what they had for dinner. An insula can stretch up 5, 6, even 7 stories. The ground floors often house shops and taverns, noisy and smoky all day long. The wealthier tenants live on the lower floors, where rent is higher but safer. The upper stories are cheaper and more dangerous. The walls are flimsier, the rooms smaller, the risk of collapse much greater. Water. Forget running taps. You fetch it from a public fountain down the street. Toilets. Maybe a communal latrine, if you're lucky. More often, it's a chamber pot dumped out the window. Yes, walking the streets of Rome at night is an exercise in dodging flying waste. Fires are the greatest danger. One knocked over oil lamp and the whole building goes up in flames. The Emperor Augustus once had to set up a fire brigade just to deal with the constant blazes. If you survive to see your insula still standing after a year, count yourself fortunate. Domos, the city. Homes of the wealthy, if fortune smiles on you. You live in a domus, the private city house of the wealthy. These aren't palaces by imperial standards, but they're luxurious compared to insulae. A domus has a grand entrance opening into an atrium central, hall with a pool to catch rainwater from the roof. Mosaics decorate the floors, paint the walls, and household shrines guard the corners. Further in, there's a dining room for banquets, a kitchen for slaves to toil in, and bedrooms tucked away from the noise of the street. Some domus even have gardens with fountains, flowers, and statues of gods. For the elite, the house isn't just shelter, it's a stage. Every room, every decoration, every guest list screams status. When you visit a senator's domos, you're meant to be impressed, maybe even awed. Villas escaping the city, the truly wealthy, though prefer their villas country estates, far from Rome's chaos. Villas sprawl across the countryside, complete with orchards, fish ponds, vineyards, and private baths. Here, the rich relax, host poetry readings, hunt game, or simply bask in the silence. Of course, villas aren't just for leisure. They're also working estates, staffed by slaves who farm the land and keep the wine flowing. For the owner, it's profit and prestige rolled into one. For the slaves, it's endless labor with no escape. Still, compared to the insula, a villa feels like another world. One smells of sewage and smoke, the other of roses and roasted peacocks. Family structure, paterfamilias rules. All now let's step inside and meet the family. Roman households are built around one iron rule. The paterfamilias the father is boss legally. He holds absolute power over his family, wife, children, slaves. In theory, he can even decide matters of life and death. Does he always wield that power harshly? Not necessarily. Many paterfamilias rule with care rather than cruelty. But the law is clear. Authority rests in his hands. His word is final. For women, life revolves around marriage, household management, and children. Roman women can own property, run businesses, and influence politics through family ties, but officially, they're always under the authority of a man-father, husband, or guardian. Some chafe at this. Others wield quiet power behind the scenes. Marriage, business before love. Forget romantic weddings. Roman marriages are less about love and more about alliances. Families arrange them to strengthen ties, secure dowries, or climb the social ladder. The bride is often a teenager. The groom may be much older. Ceremonies are simple joining hands, exchanging vows, offering sacrifices to the gods. Then life together begins, raising children, managing slaves, hosting dinners. Love may grow or not. Either way, duty comes. First, divorce, though, is surprisingly easy. If a marriage doesn't work, either partner can end it. There's no shame, no scandal. Marriages form and dissolve as politics and fortunes change. Children, precious but fragile children, are both joy and heartbreak in Rome. Families hope for many because infant mortality is cruelly high. A baby's first days are perilous. Many don't survive past infancy. Those who do are cherished at least until they're old enough to work. Education varies. Wealthy boys study grammar, rhetoric, and philosophy, preparing for careers in politics. Girls learn household management, music, and sometimes reading and writing. Poor children often skip school altogether. Learning trades or helping at home plays still exists. Toys include wooden dolls, balls, and hobby horses. Games of knucklebones like dice are common. Childhood laughter echoes even in the darkest alleys, but always with the shadow of fragility. Slaves within the household. No Roman household runs without slaves. They cook, clean, tend fires, tutor children, and wait at tables. Their presence is constant, their labor invisible to their masters. Some slaves are treated harshly, punished for mistakes, denied comfort. Others, especially tutors or secretaries, may live relatively well, even gaining eventual freedom. But always, they remain property at the mercy of the paterfamilias. Daily rhythms of home. So, what does an evening in a Roman household look like? If you're poor, it's simple. You return to your insula, light a smoky oil lamp, share bread and olives with your family, and collapse into bed. Privacy is non-existent, comfort minimal, but you're together. If you're rich, your evening means reclining in the dining room while slaves bring course after course, fish, meat, fruits, wines. Guests fill the room with chatter. Poets recite verses. Musicians play the lyre. Afterward, you stroll your garden or soak in your private bath. Luxury bought on the backs of others. Either way, night in Rome hums with life. From crowded tenements to marble villas, families gather, laugh, argue, dream, and sleep under the same Roman stars. Why it matters: housing and family define who you are. Your address marks your class. Your family ties shape your future. A poor man in an insula struggles for survival. A senator in a villa plots politics between banquets. Yet both share the same city, breathe the same smoky air, and rely on the same empire. And tomorrow, when dawn comes, you'll rise again in your cramped bed or marble chamber, ready to face another day. Because in Rome, survival isn't just about power or gods, it's about enduring daily life in whatever home you can claim. If housing shows where you belong in Rome, food shows how long you'll last. Forget modern grocery stores with shelves stacked high. Eating in Rome is a constant negotiation between hunger, luck, and class. The poor man's diet, bread, porridge, and hope. Let's start at the bottom, where most people live. Breakfast? If you get one at all, it's yesterday's bread dipped in wine or water. Maybe a few olives, if fortune smiles. Lunch is more of the same flatbread, perhaps some cheese. Maybe figs when they're in season. Dinner is the day's main meal, but don't picture steaming roasts. Think barley, porridge, beans, lentils, and whatever vegetables you can scrape together. Meat is rare, fish a luxury, and spices nearly impossible. If you're lucky, you might flavor your porridge with garum, Rome's famous fermented fish sauce. If you're not lucky, you just chew and swallow, hoping tomorrow brings more. Hunger is a constant companion. Miss the grain dole, and your stomach growls all night. You may see exotic goods in the markets, cinnamon, pepper, honey cakes, but they're for other people. For you, survival tastes like mush, the grain dole. Rome's lifeline, remember, the unknowner, the grain distribution. It's not just politics, it's dinner. Citizens line up with baskets, receive their allotment of grain, and carry it home to grind, knead, and bake. The bread it produces is coarse, dense, often gritty with bits of stone from the mill. Dentists of the future will have a field day studying Roman teeth worn down by their own bread. But bread fills bellies, and that's what matters. Street food, cheap and risky, too tired to cook. Rome has an answer. The street vendors. Stalls sell hot bread, sausages, stews, and chickpea pancakes. The smell lures you in, but hygiene is questionable. Food sits out in the sun, flies buzz around, and you pray you don't end the night doubled over with stomach cramps. Taverns and popinae, cheap eateries, also beckon. Here you can get wine, stew, and the occasional bit of meat. But these places are rowdy, filled with drunkards, gamblers, and thieves. You come for food, you stay for trouble. The rich man's table, banquets of excess now. Let's swing to the other extreme. If you're wealthy, dining is less about survival and more about theater. Meals aren't eaten, they're performed. Picture reclining on couches around a low table, propped on cushions, slaves hovering nearby with trays. The first course arrives. Oysters, eggs, salads of fresh greens. Then come roasted meat sport. Lamb, perhaps even peacock or flamingo tongue if your host wants to impress. Fish arrives next, swimming in sauces spiced with pepper, cinnamon, or saffron imported from across the empire. And always, wine flows. Not just any wine, but carefully diluted, mixed with honey, herbs, or even seawater. To drink it undiluted is considered barbaric. The rich turn every sip into sophistication. Dessert. Sweet cakes with honey, fresh fruit, nuts, dates stuffed with almonds. By the end, your stomach is stuffed, but slaves bring perfumed napkins. Musicians strike up songs, and poets recite verses to keep the mood lively. Garum. Rome's favorite flavor. We can't talk about Roman food without mentioning garum. Imagine fish left to rot in vats of salt until it becomes a pungent, soupy liquid. That's garum, and Romans put it on everything. Poor or rich, everyone uses it. It's ketchup, soy sauce, and Worcestershire sauce all rolled into one, though the smell alone could empty a room. Amphorae of garum travel across the empire, spreading its salty punch from Spain to Syria. It may taste strange, but for Romans, no dish is complete without a splash. If your neighbor's apartment reeks, odds are they just opened a jar. Dining Rituals and etiquette dinning isn't just about food, it's about manners. The wealthy recline at banquets, lying on their sides, while slaves serve course after course. Guests are carefully chosen. Inviting the right people boosts your prestige. Inviting the wrong ones ruins your reputation. Conversation is part of the feast. Politics, philosophy, gossip, all flows with the wine. Guests flatter their host, laugh at his jokes, and pretend to enjoy the lute player. Behind the performance lies calculation. Who gains favor? Who earns an invitation back? Who's snubbed for the poor? Etiquette is simpler. Eat quickly before someone steals your portion. Festive feasts and public meals on holidays. Food bursts from the private into the public. Festivals bring free distributions. Bread, oil, sometimes even meat. During Saturnalia, masters dine with slaves. Tables groan under roasted animals, and wine flows without restraint. Victory parades and imperial birthdays often include feasts for the masses. For a few rare nights, even the poor taste luxury. Then, the festival ends and porridge returns. Food and identity. Food in Rome isn't just nourishment, it's identity. To eat barley instead of wheat marks you as poor. To recline on couches instead of sitting on stools marks you as wealthy. To serve flamingo tongues at your banquet marks you as eccentric, maybe even vulgar. Your meals say who you are, what you can afford, where you stand in the social ladder, and in Rome, everyone is watching. Why it matters what you eat decides how you live. The poor survive on grain and luck. The rich flaunt power with peacocks and garum. Between them lies a world bound by food, hunger driving riots, feasts buying loyalty, meals binding families and friends. So tonight, when you gnaw on your crust of bread or recline at a banquet with a cup of honeyed wine, remember, food isn't just dinner in Rome. It's politics, survival, and theater served on a plate. Health and medicine. If food keeps you alive, health decides how long you'll stay that way. And in Rome, staying healthy is less about doctors and more about dodging disaster. Between dirty streets, questionable cures, and mysterious plagues, life expectancy isn't great. But that doesn't mean Romans didn't try. Everyday health surrounded by dangers. Start with the basics. Your water, aqueducts, bring it in. Fountains deliver it. But the pipes, they're often lined with lead. Scholars argue whether it poisoned Romans slowly. But either way, it's not exactly a vitamin boost. Then there's the streets. Open sewers run along alleys. Chamber pots fly from upper windows, and stray dogs roam freely. Sanitation is minimal. Wounds get infected. Lice and fleas spread, and vermin live closer to you than family. Your diet doesn't help. Bread and porridge fill you up, but nutrition is uneven. Deficiencies are common. Children suffer stunted growth, teeth rot early, and bones show signs of constant stress. And when illness strikes, options are limited. Roman doctors, learned and dangerous. Rome has doctors, yes, but their reputation is mixed. Some are learned, trained in Greek medicine, reading Hippocrates and Galen. They study the body, experiment with herbs, and even attempt surgeries. Others, quacks, street healers selling miracle potions, snake oil salesmen promising cures, and midwives using charms as much as knowledge. You never know whether you'll meet a skilled physician or a fraud who thinks drinking owl's blood cures headaches. Doctors aren't cheap either. The poor rely on home remedies or temples. while the rich hire personal physicians, sometimes Greek slaves, famous for their expertise. Strange remedies. Roman medicine mixes practicality with superstition. For a fever, a doctor might prescribe willow bark tear treatment that actually contains the chemical basis for aspirin. But he might also suggest wearing a charm around your neck or drinking wine infused with herbs of questionable effect. Some remedies are outright bizarre. Sore throat, gargle, vinegar, and goat fat. Toothache, burn a mouse and apply the ashes. Epilepsy, drink the blood of a freshly killed gladiator. Yes, that was a thing. Desperate times call for desperate hand, sometimes horrifying measures. Surgery, risky business. Roman surgeons perform impressive operations for their time. They set broken bones with splints, use scalpels and forceps, and even attempt cataract surgery with needles. Battlefield medicine advances quickly, with doctors stitching wounds and amputating limbs when needed. But there's no anesthesia, no antiseptics, no real understanding of infection. Surgery is agony, and survival depends as much on luck as skill. A cut can save your life or end it faster. Midwives and childbirth. For women, the greatest health risk is childbirth. Midwives guide labor using herbs, prayers, and experience. But complications are common. Obstructed births, infections, hemorrhage. Many women die young, not from war or famine, but from giving life. Infant mortality is equally brutal. A quarter, maybe even half of babies never see their first birthday. Families celebrate every survival as a victory. Public health, baths, and latrines. Not everything is grim. Rome does invest in public health, sort of. The famous baths aren't just for leisure, they're a form of hygiene. Soaking in warm pools, scraping oil and dirt off your skin, sweating in the steam room, it all helps keep bodies cleaner than you might expect. Public latrines, though basic, also manage waste better than many later societies. Long stone benches with holes sit overflowing water, flushing away what needs flushing. Communal sponges on sticks, shared by everyone, serve as toilet paper. Unsanitary by our standards, but better than nothing. Still, hygiene doesn't equal health. Crowded baths spread skin diseases, and latrines spread parasites. You might leave feeling clean, but the germs come with you. Plagues and epidemics. Few decades, disaster strikes in the form of plague. The Antonine Plague, hitting in the late 2nd century CE, kills millions. Historians debate whether it's smallpox or measles, but whatever it is, it devastates the empire. Armies weaken, cities empty, families vanish. In crowded Rome, disease spreads like wildfire. There's no real treatment, no understanding of germs, just prayers and fumigations. The gods are blamed, sacrifices increase, and survival feels like chance. Mental health and superstition. Romans don't separate mental and physical health. Sadness, nightmares, anxiety, these are signs of imbalance, maybe even curses. Remedies include diet changes, music, baths, or prayers. Serious cases might be treated with chains or isolation. Superstition runs deep. If medicine fails, you turn to magic, amulets against fever, spells for protection, offerings at healing temples. The line between doctor and sorcerer blurs. Life expectancy, a harsh reality. So, how long do you live in Rome? On average, not long. Infant mortality drags numbers down, but even surviving adults rarely see old age. 30 or 40 years is common. Those who reach 50 are considered lucky, elders in their community. Yet for all the hardship, Romans keep pushing forward. They develop medical texts that influence Europe for centuries. They experiment, observe, and refine, laying groundwork for future science even if much of it is tangled with superstition. Why it matters health. In Rome isn't just about the body, it's about survival. Disease, childbirth, wounds, malnutrition. Corner hides danger. Medicine is a gamble. Remedies range from brilliant to bizarre, and luck is as important as treatment. For you, the ordinary Roman, every day of health is a small miracle. You wake, you eat, you walk the crowded streets, and if you go to bed without fever or pain, you count yourself blessed. Tomorrow might bring illness, but tonight you breathe, you live, you endure. Death and afterlife, no matter how much bread you eat, how many baths you take, or how many gods you pray to, death in Rome is never far away. Disease, famine, childbirth, accidents, war life is short, and death waits in every shadow. But Romans don't ignore it. They build rituals, tombs, and beliefs to give it meaning, to soften its sting, and to remind the living of their place in the grand order. Death at home for most Romans. Death comes quietly at home or suddenly in the street. When someone dies, the body is laid out in the atrium, the central hall of the house, dressed in their best clothes. Friends and family gather to mourn, to touch the body, to say farewell. If the family is wealthy, professional mourners join in, wailing loudly, tearing their hair and beating their chests. It's a display of grief as much as sorrow, showing the community how deeply the dead were loved, or at least how important they were. The poor have simpler send-offs. A body wrapped in cloth, carried out quickly, buried without pomp. Yet even here, ritual matters. To die without burial is the greatest shame, a fate feared more than death itself. Funerals, ceremony, and spectacle. Funerals in Rome are public events. The body is carried through the streets on a bier, accompanied by music, torchlight, and chanting. If the deceased was powerful, the procession can feel like a parade. Actors wearing masks of ancestors, slaves carrying symbols of office, trumpeters blasting mournful notes. At the tomb or pyre, final rites are given. The body may be cremated, flames rising as mourners throw offerings, wine oil, food into the fire. Or it may be buried, sealed in a coffin or tomb. Either way, the goal is the same: to ensure the soul's safe journey into the afterlife. Cremation and burial. In early Rome, cremation is common. Fires blaze outside the city walls, reducing the body to ashes, which are then collected in urns and placed in tombs. Later, burial becomes more popular, with bodies laid underground in stone sarcophagi. Why the change? Fashion, belief, and practicality. Cremation requires huge amounts of wood, harder to source as the empire grows. Burial allows more elaborate tombs, monuments, and inscriptions. By your time, both practices exist side by side. Whether you burn or bury, what matters most is ritual. Without it, the soul is lost, wandering, restless. The tombs of Rome walk along the Appian Way, one of Rome's great roads, and you'll pass rows of tombs lining the roadside. Wealthy families build grand mausoleums here, carved with inscriptions, decorated with statues. Even in death, status must be displayed. Some tombs boast poems, praising the virtues of the deceased. Others include warnings: do not disturb these bones. For the rich, a tomb is not just a resting place, it's a monument to memory, ensuring their name survives. The poor cannot afford such luxury. Their graves lie in simple plots, marked with pottery shards or wooden stakes. In crowded cemeteries, bodies may even share a pit, forgotten as soon as the earth covers them. Yet even here, families leave offerings, a jug of wine, a loaf of bread, a few coins for the journey beyond. Coins for the ferryman. Romans believe the soul travels to the underworld after death. To cross the river Styx, the soul must pay the ferryman. Charon, that's why a coin, an obolus or denarius, is placed in the mouth or on the eyes of the dead. Without payment, the soul wanders, trapped on the wrong side of the river. It's a small act of love, ensuring safe passage. Even the poorest families scrape together a coin, because no one wants their loved ones stranded between worlds. The underworld, Roman afterlife beliefs, what waits beyond the river. For Romans, the afterlife blends myth and philosophy. In popular belief, the dead journey to the underworld ruled by Pluto and Proserpina. Souls are judged, then sent to their fates. The fields of asphodel, for ordinary lives. The Elysian fields for heroes, or Tartarus for the wicked. It's not a paradise or torment in the Christian sense. It's more a continuation, a shadowy mirror of life. You eat, you walk, you remember. Comfort comes less from heaven's promise than from family memory. To be remembered is to live on. To be forgotten is to die twice. Ancestor worship. Romans honor their dead constantly. Household shrines hold images of ancestors, honored with offerings of wine, incense, or food. During the festival of Parentalia, families visit tombs, decorate them with flowers, and share meals with the spirits. The dead are never truly gone. They linger, guiding, watching, protecting. Forget them, and misfortune follows. Remember them, and their strength flows into your life. Fear of restless dead, but death has its darker side. Not all souls rest peacefully. Some return as Lemurus, spirits wandering at night, haunting the living. To appease them, families perform rituals, tossing black beans over their shoulders while chanting charms. The fear of the unburied is strongest. Soldiers fallen in distant lands, slaves discarded in ditches, criminals denied rights all risk, becoming wandering shades. To die without burial is to lose your place among the ancestors. Philosophy and death among the educated. Philosophy shapes views of death. Stoics preach acceptance. Death is natural, a return to the universe. Epicureans argue there is no afterlife at all. Death is simply nothingness, not to be feared. These ideas circulate in debates, in schools, in letters. But for the average Roman, philosophy is distant. Rituals matter more than theories. Coins, tombs, offerings, that's what ensures peace. Why it matters. Death in Rome is never hidden. Tombs line the roads. Funerals march through the streets. Shrines stand in every home. You're reminded daily that life is fragile, fleeting, and precious. For you, the ordinary Roman, death is not just an ending, but a duty to bury your kin. Honor your ancestors, and hope your descendants do the same for you tonight. As you drift into sleep, imagine the flicker of torchlight at a funeral, the soft sound of coins placed on eyes, the murmur of prayers over the tomb. In Rome, death is not to be feared but prepared, forewoven into the rhythm of life. You've walked the streets of Rome now, eaten its bread, breathed its smoke, prayed in its temples, sweated in its baths, argued in its taverns, and stood in silence at its tombs. You've seen emperors scheme, slaves toil, children laugh, soldiers march, and mourners weep. You've felt the fragility of life and the certainty of death. And yet, through all of it, you've also felt something else. Endurance. Life in the midst of hardship. Rome is not easy. Hunger stalks the poor, fire threatens the insular, disease spreads without warning, and death waits always nearby. For the wealthy, luxury glitters, but even palaces echo with fear of betrayal, of politics, of sudden downfall. And yet, despite the dangers, life continues. People work, marry, gossip, pray, play games, sing songs. Families gather around oil lamps. Children chase balls through alleyways. Neighbors share bread at taverns. There is laughter, there is love, even in the shadow of hardship. Then and now it's tempting to see Rome as alien, a place so far removed from modern life that we cannot recognize ourselves. And yet look closer. The need for food, the search for shelter, the joy of festivals, the fear of illness, the grief of loss, the hope for meaning, these are timeless. You, with your smartphone and electricity, aren't so different from the Romans standing in line for grain or reclining at a banquet. You both ask the same questions. Will I eat tomorrow? Will my family be safe? What comes after death? And will anyone remember my name? The grandeur and the struggle room leaves monuments behind arches, aqueducts, amphitheaters, marble statues. They dazzle us with grandeur, with the idea of empire. At its peak, but behind every stone lies human struggle. The slaves who built them, the soldiers who defended them, the citizens who filled them with noise and life. The greatness of Rome isn't only in its emperors or its legions. It's in its people, ordinary and extraordinary, surviving day by day. Sleep with the Romans. And so, as you prepare to drift into sleep, imagine yourself once more in that world. The streets grow quiet, torches flicker, the city hums with distant echoes. Somewhere, a senator plots, a baker kneads dough, a mother hushes her child, a soldier sharpens his sword. Life moves on, as it always has. You lie on your straw mattress or your silk-covered couch, listening to the sounds of the city, the barking of dogs, the creak of wooden carts, the faint laughter of neighbors. Above you, stars shine the same way they shine tonight. Close your eyes. Let the noise fade. Let the weight of Rome drift into dreams. You are alive, for now, in the empire that conquered the world, and tomorrow will bring whatever it brings. Why it matters? Why tell this story? Because Rome is not just marble and emperors. It's not just battles and borders. It's people messy, flawed, resilient, fragile, enduring by stepping into their lives, even for a night. You see the threads that connect us across centuries. You see how survival, love, fear, hope, and memory make us human then, now, always. And maybe, as you fall asleep, you'll carry a little gratitude for your warm bed, clean water, quiet night, things no Roman could take for granted. Final thought. And death in the Roman Empire were harsh, yes, but they were also human. And in the end, that's what lingers, the heartbeat of ordinary lives echoing through history, reminding us that even in the greatest empire, survival was its own kind of victory. So rest now, traveler. You've walked the empire, you've shared its bread, you've faced its shadows. Let sleep take you, as it once took the Romans, beneath the same stars, into the same silence.